Welcome back to part 2 of lecture 2. In the first part of this lecture, we discussed the distinctive kind of heroism that Plato sees in the figure of Socrates. We also looked at an example of the Socratic method in action in Socrates' refutation of Meletus in the Apology. In this video, we'll study another famous Platonic dialogue, the Symposium, and consider a second example of the Socratic method in action. The Apology gives us a sense for why many of Socrates' contemporaries in Athens viewed him as a corrupting figure and a threat to the established order of civic life, insofar as he encouraged critical questioning and a re-evaluation of everyday thinking and conventional wisdom. The Symposium is a dialogue that addresses the topic of love, and unlike in the Apology, where we see the figure of Socrates as a threat, in this text, Plato explores the hidden beauty of Socrates and what it was that many of his contemporaries found captivating about him. We'll address this question at the end of this lecture by discussing an interesting metaphor put forward in the text, the idea that true love involves giving birth in beauty. So as I said, the Symposium is a dialogue that focuses on the nature of love. The Greek term here is eros, and the dialogue takes place during a drinking party among friends. Now, in the Greek world, drinking parties weren't the sorts of events where you'd go to be left completely senseless. This was instead an occasion for people to get together and have meaningful conversations about certain topics, usually accompanied with some drink. Multiple speakers in the Symposium give speeches in praise of love, and all of these speakers were well-known intellectuals during Plato's day, many of them with far more prestige than Socrates, who's seen by others in the text as possessing a kind of wisdom but also as a bit of an oddball. As the dialogue progresses, Socrates is eventually led to give a speech of his own about love, because it turns out he's not really impressed with the speeches that came before. One of these speeches is delivered by Agathon, who has just won a major prize for a play he's written. Agathon's speech on love directly precedes Socrates' speech in the text, and Socrates spends some time explaining what he thinks Agathon has got wrong about love. Agathon was a very successful and well-known writer of tragedies in the 5th century BCE, and the speech on love he develops in the Symposium is well delivered, but quite flowery and elaborate. Socrates states at 198e that what Agathon and all the other speakers before him have done hasn't involved actually praising love. What they've done is make everyone think that they're praising love. By contrast, Socrates, in giving his own speech, claims that he's going to try and explain the essence of love and what it truly is. He says the words and phrasing will take care of themselves. The speech might not be flowery and stylish, but he thinks it will more accurately convey what love is. Before we get to Socrates' view of love, let's see how and why he takes issue with Agathon's view. Our assigned reading from the Symposium begins with a little elenchus, where Socrates cross-examines Agathon. During his speech, Agathon had made a specific claim that love is the most beautiful and the best of the gods. In engaging with Agathon, Socrates proceeds to refute this idea through elenctic argument. How does the argument work? Well, let's do another exercise here in argument analysis by looking at some quotes from the dialogue to see how each of them represents a step or a link in a chain of reasoning that Agathon agrees to. As a result, after putting the sequence of steps together, Agathon is led to see he doesn't really understand the nature of love at all. Specifically, his claim that love is the most beautiful of the gods doesn't stand up to careful scrutiny as a result of this argument. The argument begins at 200e to 201a in the dialogue. Socrates has already been questioning Agathon a bit, and at this stage he reviews a few points on which they've agreed. The points are these. First, that love is the love of something, and second, that love involves the experience of a present need. Socrates asks next whether, on Agathon's view, love is a desire for beauty and never for ugliness. Agathon agrees. Socrates then points out, so love has to need beauty then, and does not have it. Agathon says yes, necessarily. And Socrates then asks, if something needs beauty and has got no beauty at all, would you still say that it's beautiful? Certainly not, Agathon replies, at which point Socrates brings everything home. Do you still agree then that love is beautiful if those things are so? And Agathon says in response, it turns out, Socrates, I did not know what I was talking about in that speech. Alright, so how does this elenchus work? Let's look at each of these quotes step by step and see what each of them is saying. We'll try to summarize each quote in terms of the claims that are being made, so that by the end of the argument, we can see how Agathon has refuted himself. Recall, to begin with, how Socrates opens the argument. Let's review the points on which we've agreed, he says. Aren't they, first, that love is the love of something, and second, that he loves things of which he has a present need? There are two different claims here, and we can summarize them in this way. Socrates is saying that love has to be the love of something, and next, he's pointing out that when you love something, that implies a present need or a lack of the thing that you love. Agathon agrees to both points. Next, we have this quote. Socrates asks whether love, according to Agathon, is a desire for beauty and never for ugliness. The idea that love is the love of beauty is something that Agathon had claimed earlier in his speech. Obviously, then, he agrees to this, and so we can put the claim simply. Love is a desire for beauty. From all of these points, Socrates infers that love has to need beauty and does not have it. And again, this follows because if love implies some sort of need or lack of the thing one loves, and love is a desire for beauty, then love needs beauty. Once more, Agathon agrees. Socrates then asks whether if something needs beauty and has got no beauty, whether it's beautiful. And Agathon responds that something that lacks beauty certainly cannot be beautiful. So this means love is not beautiful. And at this point, we can see how, based on this chain of reasoning, Agathon has refuted himself. That's why he says, it turns out, Socrates, I didn't know what I was talking about in that speech. A concise expression of the state of aporia, or confusion, that Agathon is left in. And thus we see again, as in the Apology with Socrates' refutation of Miletus, how by closely reviewing the questions and answers between Socrates and an interlocutor, how a series of quotes can be summarized as a series of claims that lead to a conclusion that contradicts the initial claim made by an interlocutor. In this case, Agathon, who originally claimed in his speech that love is the most beautiful of gods, is led to see that love is not beautiful based on his own beliefs, based on what he agreed to with Socrates in the elenchus. Now, you might ask here, why is Socrates doing this? What's the point of refuting Agathon and showing him that his ideas are confused? Because unlike in the Apology, where Socrates' life is at stake and it seems fine for him to refute the accusations that Miletus is making against him, in the Symposium, it looks like he's doing something else with Agathon. This isn't a question of someone's life on the line, it's Agathon's beliefs that are on the line and that Socrates is critically assessing. Why exactly is Socrates doing this? Why induce aporia in people? What's the good of interrogating Agathon's views in this way and leaving him confused? Well, there are lots of ways to address this question, but I think one thing Plato's clearly trying to do through Socrates in the Symposium is get us to reconceive the nature of love and what it really means to love. Agathon, in this case, has delivered a very conventional and nice-sounding speech in praise of love, but there's something missing, something deeply lacking in Agathon's conception of the nature of love, and this is something that Socrates proceeds to show during the remainder of the dialogue. The view of love we get in the rest of Socrates' speech is actually not, he claims, a view that he's developed. It's a view that he's learned from someone else. Her name is Diotima, and Socrates recounts in this part of the dialogue how Diotima, a priestess in ancient Greece, essentially schooled him in the art of love when he was younger. A good chunk of this part of the Symposium shows us Socrates being cross-examined by someone else. It doesn't happen often in Plato's dialogues that we see Socrates refuted, but this is an instance where we see that, where Diotima shows Socrates that he needs to rethink his understanding of love. There are various things that Diotima asserts here in explaining the nature of love to Socrates. One of her key claims is that love is wanting to possess the good forever. By this, she means love involves some kind of motivation to have good things in your life throughout your life. That's the sort of notion of possession being put forward here. It's not possession in the sense of consuming and owning something that Diotima has in mind, but simply having present to yourself good things, things that you consider good and valuable. That's what love is, according to Diotima. After this, the question becomes how to love. Let's assume that to love something is to desire having good things in your life forever. How do we do this? What does loving involve? And here, Diotima famously claims in the Symposium that love involves giving birth in beauty. But what does she mean in making this cryptic claim? Well, this is a metaphor, and it's a metaphor that Diotima models on processes of bodily pregnancy and birth. Diotima is suggesting here that just as there's physical pregnancy, individuals can also experience a form of soul pregnancy. This involves learning to recognize and appreciate the diverse manifestations of beauty in the world. The journey begins with sensory perception, allowing us to appreciate beauty in the material world around us, the world of the senses. But Diotima argues this is only the starting point. As we learn to love, a shift occurs where we're led to explore and comprehend deeper forms of beauty. To illustrate this, Diotima uses another metaphor of ascending steps that lead to a universal form of beauty. The journey progresses from sensory experiences to abstract and intangible representations of beauty, such as those found in music, art, poetry, laws, theories, and ideals. Notice how important and significant this move is. Through Diotima's speech, Plato makes a groundbreaking contribution here to the history of intellectual thought. He's the first in the Western tradition to suggest that love can extend beyond physical or romantic attachments to embrace abstract concepts like art, poetry, and ideals. And he's arguing that our appreciation of such things can be just as passionate as any romantic love. In fact, once we see this, Plato believes our views on romantic love itself need to evolve. Instead of focusing on a person's physical beauty, he suggests, we need to recognize a deeper beauty that resides in a person's character and life choices. This pursuit of beauty, as Diotima describes it, is not merely about liking pretty things, it's a metaphysical endeavor aimed at understanding a form of beauty, a unifying ideal that ties together all the instances of beauty we encounter in our lives. The lesson here is that beauty transcends mere sensory perception. We'll return to the study of metaphysical questions later in this course, but for now, what we need to highlight about Diotima's view is the transformative potential of the ascent she's describing. By exploring various expressions of beauty and arriving at an understanding of the form of beauty, she claims, not only do we see the world in new ways, but we enhance our lives and become better people. What we give birth to, finally, according to this view, is a new self. We can see all of this laid out in the following famous excerpt from Diotima's speech. This is what it is to go aright, she says, or be led by another into the mystery of love. One goes always upwards for the sake of this beauty, starting out from beautiful things and using them like rising stairs, from one body to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies, then from beautiful bodies to beautiful customs, and from customs to learning beautiful things. And from these lessons he arrives in the end at this lesson, which is learning of this very beauty, so that in the end he comes to know just what it is to be beautiful. Notice here how Diotima is outlining a journey of escalating appreciation for beauty. This is not a haphazard journey, but one that's directed upwards, signifying a movement towards something greater and more meaningful. She uses the metaphor of rising stairs to emphasize the progressive nature of this quest. You start by appreciating the beauty of a single body, and then your understanding deepens until you reach a stage where you can see the beauty of all bodies. But it doesn't stop there. Next, you move on to beautiful customs. This could mean the rituals, traditions, or ethical practices that communities value. From customs, you ascend to learning beautiful things, which can encompass a range of intellectual and creative pursuits like music theory and science. Eventually, this journey culminates in the understanding of this very beauty, a universal, unifying concept that Diotima also calls true beauty. It's an idea that transcends individual instances and types of beauty, an idea of what it really means to be beautiful. Diotima then ends by making a powerful point about virtue. Or haven't you remembered, she says, that in that life alone, when a person looks at beauty in the only way that beauty can be seen, only then will it become possible for him to give birth not to images of virtue, because he's in touch with no images, but to true virtue, because he's in touch with true beauty. Diotima argues here that only when a person is in touch with true beauty can they give birth to true virtue. This means that our engagement with beauty isn't just a search for personal pleasure or the enjoyment of attractive things. Instead, it's a transformative experience that has the potential to make us live better lives. After Diotima's speech in the Symposium, we encounter a dramatic shift in the dialogue with the entrance of Alcibiades. Alcibiades, a famous and politically ambitious Athenian, initially sought to become Socrates' lover, hoping that the relationship would help him achieve his political goals. Here you can see him in two depictions in art history, a scene on the top where he's represented engaging with Socrates in Raphael's School of Athens, a 16th century mural painting we'll return to again in this course, and another scene at the bottom, also with Socrates, from the 18th century. The problem with Alcibiades' interest in Socrates for Plato is that he seeks the wrong things from Socrates in exchange for the wrong things. Consider how Socrates makes this point to Alcibiades in a passage near the end of the dialogue. "Dear Alcibiades," Socrates says, "if I really have in me the power to make you a better man, then you can see in me a beauty that is really beyond description and makes your own remarkable good looks pale in comparison. But then, is this a fair exchange that you propose? You seem to me to want more than your proper share. You offer the merest appearance of beauty, and in return you want the thing itself, gold in exchange for bronze." Here, Plato exposes the flawed nature of Alcibiades' pursuit. Alcibiades seeks tangible, worldly gains, political power from Socrates, and he offers only superficial beauty, the sexual use of his body, in return. Socrates rebukes this, arguing that the beauty within him is of a higher transformative nature. The transaction Alcibiades proposes is fundamentally unequal. It's like trading gold for bronze. So to truly appreciate the beauty in Socrates, Plato suggests we must engage with him in the right way. As we observed in the last lecture, Socrates has inspired countless individuals from across the world and across many centuries. Consider the image on the left, a depiction of Socrates engaging with others in a medieval Arabic manuscript. His far-reaching influence is all the more remarkable given that Socrates himself left no writings that have survived. It's primarily through his companions, chiefly Plato, that we've come to understand his enduring legacy. Seeing the beauty in Socrates as these people have means seeing the value in aporia, the state of puzzlement or confusion that Socrates typically induced in his interlocutors, and using that aporia as a stimulus to think differently and seek wisdom ourselves. In this context, the examined life that Socrates champions in the Apology isn't just about asking questions. It's about adopting a philosophical way of life oneself. As we noted in the last video, this requires a new kind of wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. It involves a life committed to caring for oneself in the deepest philosophical sense. If this is right, there may be a way in which Plato wants us to read the Apology allegorically. On this reading, Plato is offering us a cautionary tale. Don't extinguish the Socratic impulse within you, he's telling us, as the Athenians did by sentencing Socrates to death. Instead, nurture that impulse. See whether it can provide a guide in finding true beauty, enabling you to live a life that's not just examined, but enriched. Well, that concludes our second lecture and this introductory unit. In this lecture, we've discussed Plato's Apology further. We've also discussed the Socratic method in more detail and what Plato believed Socrates stood for. That, in turn, has led us to take a look at Plato's Symposium and the idea of love as giving birth in beauty that Diotima puts forward in the text. We concluded by exploring how this notion of love in Diotima's speech might prompt us to consider the beauty in Socrates, and how that might lead us to consider the beauty in our own life. Having considered the figure of Socrates, next week we'll be ready to start Unit 1 of this course, where we'll examine how Plato draws inspiration from Socrates' life to develop philosophical views of his own. We'll focus especially here on Plato's views on human psychology and their relevance to his understanding of the good life. I hope you've enjoyed this intro unit and that you're looking forward to moving on.